Hello, everybody. This is Matt Marx from MWR Labs.
Perfect. Thanks. Hi everyone. It's really good to be here. So thanks for coming through. It's really exciting for me to be here in Vegas. First time in the States, so it's a good place to be. Um, so yeah, thanks for coming through. I was going to introduce you to my tool WordHound, which I'm releasing now as open source, which will be available to download straight after this talk. So very briefly, just who am I? I'm a security consultant. I work for MWR in South Africa in Johannesburg, and the Johannesburg branch. I'm also studying at Rhodes University. I'm doing my honors degree in computer science. Um, so basically, I'm the resident password guy there. So I didn't apply for the role, but I just sort of fell into it. But it is what it is. So basically, the outline for this talk, I've introduced myself already. But I'll take you through some of the history of how I got to where I am, the steps I took to end up basically in front of you today. Then have a look at WordHound, so some of the structure, the internal workings of this tool that I've developed. Give you a quick rundown of it, show some quick examples and use cases, and then present some ideas for future work, and then take questions at the end if anyone has any. So how did I get here? So it was very humble beginnings. I was sort of tasked with becoming the. Can you guys hear me? Let me just take this one. Better, cool. So I was tasked with becoming, sort of the password guy at work, and so it was on one of my first password dumps I was working with. It was an NTLM hash dumper for Windows domain, and I was new in the field, so I just sort of thrown, the traditional things you throw at it, brute force attack, and I'd read about this new thing called Markov attacks and a dictionary attack. And I got to that stage where you sort of plateau. We heard if you were at Yanis's talk, he sort of explained it very nicely. But you reach that point at which that threshold at which either by virtue of the techniques you're using or the hardware restriction you have, you just can't push it any further. You're struggling to crack anything more. And so before I began my next sort of iteration of attack on the dump, I just sort of thought maybe that there was something that was relevant to the company that informed the kind of password someone chose. And so, but just on that, that I was sort of, I just want to expand on this. So this sort of iterative approach and the diminishing returns you get with password cracking. So the first round, you normally get quite good results. It's normally some sort of basic dictionary, 10,000 worst passwords or something similar. Throw it through a rule-based attack or whatever it may be. And you crack a large number of passwords, and then you do something else. Your next round, it might be a more specific dictionary, it might be a slightly different attack, and round 2 gets you there, and round 3 gets you there, and so on and so forth. And so the point I'm really talking about is when you get to round N, which is different for different people, but it's at that stage where you're at your wit's end. You can't, you're struggling to crack anything further. And so that's where I was. And bearing in mind that, so just bear that in mind. The situation for the dump I was working with, this is some context for it. So it had its offices in Johannesburg. It had its head offices in a suburb called North Park Place. I've obviously changed this information. The industry it was in retail, and it had distributors all over the country. And so this is a very crude sort of dictionary, but this is what I put together. And I thought to myself, maybe there's a chance that even though it's only a small dump, there's sort of just over 2,000 hashes. Maybe some of these words informed some of the decisions people made. And so you can see I put Johannesburg there, retail, marketing, North Park Place, the company name and sales. And to my surprise, the next iteration I ran, I cracked all of these. So North Park Place 1, 2, 3, 4, the part of the company name and retail 1, 2, and Johannesburg exclamation mark 4, 3, 2, 1, and so on and so forth. At the time, I was running this on a modest rig, so I didn't have a lot of hardware at my disposal. And so this was really quite a breakthrough for me, and it was a welcome. Some of these were very important hashes in terms of the company layout to have cracked. So we look at something like this, North Park Place 1, 2, 3, 4, and you ask yourself, is this a good password? And I mean, look, there are a few really bad things about it. There's a sequence. The capital letter used was the first, which is common. I mean, those are two big mistakes. But it's over 15 characters long. It's not an obviously bad root word. That's not going to turn up in any of your frequent password lists. And it's a relatively obscure suburb. So even if you had a sort of a geo list in South Africa, this would be it's unlikely you'd have that word in it. But in a scenario in which you sat down with your mate and he said, you know, I've just been given the job as a sysadmin at this company that does retail, and we've got our head offices in North Park Place. My password is North Park Place 1234. You're gonna have to say that's really, really bad. That's a really, really bad password. And so it's really interesting. So why do people choose stuff that I don't know why people choose passwords that are sort of related to the industry. It might be because the password policy at the company that the work is greater than it requires more than the normal root word they use, or maybe they want to just have a distinction between work life and their private life, and they use different passwords. I don't know, but the idea was sort of that a lot of people end up using things that are related to the industry in the company they work for, the job they're doing. And so Wordhound, right? So I did a bit of digging around, and I didn't really find anything that was out there that did what I wanted to do, and that's take advantage of this fact that people are influenced by the industry, the environment they're in, the company, the specific company they work for. So I wanted to take advantage of this fact, and there was nothing out there really that did this in the way that I wanted to do it. So basically, the idea behind Wordhound is that I give you an arbitrary company, an arbitrary target, and what I want you to do at an abstract level is just give me a custom word list specifically crafted for that target. What I want in that word list, I want things that are domain specific in terms of the language. So I want things that are related to the company, the industry they're in, maybe products they sell, if there are people involved. I want a big blob of text about the company, basically. Well, I'm not going to insult you by sort of telling you what to use a dictionary for, but there are a number of really creative and awesome things. If you had Yanni's talk yesterday with the T-Mesis stuff, that's a really cool use case for dictionaries. But there are a number of things we can use it for once we have it. But of course, the challenge is having it. So Wordhound really is what I'd like it to be, is a tool that pushes you from the threshold that you're at now, and cracking those vital, a couple of percent extra hashes as you're getting towards the end of your tether, essentially. So the idea behind how I implemented this was basically that there would be 3 phases. There was an information gathering stage in which I just went about and got everything I could about the company or the target. That includes stuff from the website, PDFs that they have, social media, any arbitrary text you could find. Strip it of noise, stuff that wasn't relevant to the company. So words like "and," "because," "you," "the," "of." I mean that's not useful stuff. And then finally just give me a word list from that. And so stage 1, right? So this is getting into how I've actually implemented it. So the information gathering stage is obviously one of the most important ones. I've built a website crawler based on top of a link checker, the tool. I've also got PDF extraction, for, as I mentioned, things like company handbooks, public releases that they might have, any published works that tech papers they've given out. And I've also integrated it with Twitter, so you can, if you want a real world sample of what people are saying about a given search term, it's a really nice, source for building dictionaries. So the result of this, after you've gone through this gathering information phase, is you've got just a massive blob of text. It's huge, it's enormous. Probably 95 to 100, 99% of it's probably not that relevant to the domain. But all the same, in there, buried inside of it, are important words and important phrases, people, products, and that sort of thing that relate to the target. And this leads to the next part, and this is really the hard part. How do we make sense of this? What's important? I mean, I don't want a dictionary of 10,000 words that is, 9,500 are completely irrelevant. And so, you could have taken, the first thing that crossed your mind is looking at something like a blacklisting, but I mean, of course, you immediately write it off. Good luck blacklisting all the words you don't want in in the English language. It's not easy. And the same as whitelist. I mean, if you really know what words you want to accept, you've basically got a dictionary. And so what I settled on eventually was having a standard of comparison. So I initially did this with, I used Project Gutenberg, and I downloaded a whole bunch of books. I sort of did some statistical analysis on how often words appear and in what order. And then what you can do is you can take your big blob of text and you pick up the first word, and it's the word "the." Now, the word "the" appears, 43,000 times for every million words, or whatever it may be. and we look at how often it appears in literature, and they near enough match up. You know what? This is probably not significant. Throw it away. But all of a sudden, we're doing a bank, and we've got a whole dump on the sort of blob of information about the bank, and the word finance has appeared 10 times more frequently in our collection phase than it has in literature, and in general everyday life. And so, hang on, this looks significant. Let's put this aside. Let's hang on to this. This could be important. And of course, this is a really nice idea. But using something like Project Gutenberg, I've very quickly discovered that languages. I mean, you always hear people say, language changes, evolves, but it really does. It was a really bad standard essentially, because a lot of the stuff had gone out of copyright. It was 100+ years old, and it wasn't a good reflection of how we spoke now. I mean, the word internet, if it appeared on a website, is probably not significant, but Project Gutenberg had no idea what that was, and so that wasn't a good standard of comparison. So this led me on to the corpus linguistics, which is essentially the idea that linguists use, you're studying language, and that the basic sort of premise behind it is that if you want to study language, the best way to do it is look at how it's used in real life. And so they basically they create these huge corpuses that have got, the hundreds of millions of words big, and they're made up of everything. They're made up of movies, dialogues from movies, theater, books, textbooks on every subject, physics, biology, chemistry, whatever it may be. And so this really massive it's an attempt to have an all-encompassing representation of language. And what's great about it is that, so we do it in 2014, let's say, we do it this year, a big research institution, copies it all down. And what you have essentially is a big snapshot of English at that time. So you've got a very accurate representation of how it's used, including slang words and sort of weird colloquial phrases. You've got a really nice representation of how language is used at that given time. So there are two really good publicly accessible ones. The Oxford University one you have to put a request through to get access to. But the University of Leicester one is the one WordHound is built on at the moment. I'm going to be sort of shortly transitioning over to the Oxford Dictionary one, which I've just got access to recently. So this is a really nice standard of comparison. So we've got a really accurate representation of how often words should appear in English, and we can compare this against stuff we've gathered on the website or on the PDFs or just through on the company essentially. So false positives. This is going to be an issue with any artificial intelligence system essentially. So it's impossible to get perfect results. I mean, there are always going to be words that are noisy, and if you set the threshold too high, you're going to miss stuff, and if you set it too low, you're going to get a lot more junk in. And so this is really a challenge. But it works pretty well. In aid of combating the redundancy and the noise, basically, I've added a cool correlation feature, which I'll show you in a second. And then the final phase, so we've seen information gathering, the processing, and then the final phase is just the profit phase. Just basically, once you've taken your words, you strip out, you evaluate what's important or not, and what you got is the dictionary that remains. So the structure of WordHound basically, as a tool, works like this. You have an industry, so let's say banking, and then to the industry belongs a number of clients. So you could maintain your own, dictionary. So you could have, Bank X, Bank Y, and Bank Z, that all belong to banking. At a client level, there are a number of things you can do. So as I mentioned, you can build those. Those are the 4 options I have at the moment. So you can build up a dictionary from a Twitter search handle, arbitrary PDFs, or the website. And then additionally, you can perform aggregation. So you sort of just concatenate the dictionaries into one massive dictionary, or you can perform additional correlation between the dictionaries, which I'll touch on in a second. And then at industry level, you can't do much, but it turns out what you can do is actually quite useful. So we've got Bank X, and Bank X sell some sort of specific shore loan insurance or something, and so it's picked that up as a word. But of course, Bank Y don't have that. And so what you can do is you can sort of try and trace common threads across the various clients that you've got belonging to an industry, and what you have left is a generic industry dictionary. I'm going to speed up a bit. I think I started a little late, so right. So basically, as a case study, perfect. So basically, as a very brief case study, I'm going to have to sort of rush through this. I was working with a battlefield dump just because, I couldn't work with any of the corporate stuff. I would really like to show you, an actual dump, but for obviously NDA reasons, I'm not going to. So in an effort to sort of make it a bit more challenging and just show you that I'm not, it's just spamming it with thousands of dictionaries, and I wanted to show you that people are influenced by, by the industry they're in and what they're surrounded by. I put this in a VM running Ubuntu with a gig of RAM and a single core processor, which is not probably the best rig for cracking. So this is just a very quick demo. This is WordHound. And I'm going to run this on a website. The only thing I've done beforehand is create an industry called gaming and a client called Battlefield. It's really simple. And then I've selected to build a dictionary from the website. You insert the URL. You can restrict it to a domain. So if you don't want to crawl the whole internet, essentially, you can do that. But I happen to want to sort of extend it and look at things that it might link to, and build it on that. I fast forwarded all this, so this is really quick. You can set the recursion depth and all that kind of good stuff. And then that's just a bit of pruning. You'll see that when you have a play around with WordHound. Okay, cool. So that's that. This is a snippet I just took for the first 30 words or whatever. And I've sort of highlighted some of the ones you can see are really actually good words to be using against, and are in some way related or would be really good in conjunction with each other. When you're attacking something like a battlefield dump. So we've got words like team, vehicle, mine, mechanics, PlayStation, hull, violence, soldiers, general, campaign, shotgun, battlefield, heroes. It's picked up all these words as things that stand out as distinct. I'm probably gonna skip this, but it's very much the same thing. This is just running one off Twitter. So I supplied battlefield as a search term, and I went and crawled 800 or so tweets, gets like 10,000 words. Tokens from that it can analyze. And again, so this is a little snippet from the Twitter word list I developed. So there's things like artillery assignments, brigade, battlefield, battles, campaign, character classes, China. You see, all these things are sort of relevant to someone who's going to be playing battlefield essentially, and thinking of this kind of thing when they're choosing a password. So yeah, this is on that really slow thing, and it was literally in the tens of passwords a second I managed to crack with that thing. These are some of the cool examples. So you can see that you got PlayStation. There's a Crisis Battlefield. So that's it's another game, but you can see that this guy's obviously a gamer, and that's probably one of his other favorite games. There's Ghost Warrior. There's Unreal Tournament. There's Electronic Arts there. So these are all passwords that I pulled straight from the dump on a really bad rig, like basically the worst you could probably get. I'm gonna probably just skip over that. It's really simple to use WordHound, so you're not missing out much with the demos. Go play with it yourself. It's really simple. Basically, what I did for LinkedIn, also running on this terrible system, I downloaded a whole bunch of PDFs on you got to consider your client base. So a lot of the guys using LinkedIn are going to be businessmen, entrepreneurs, those kinds of professional guys in professional industries. And what I did for the dictionary I built with this was I just downloaded a whole bunch of entrepreneurial, manual for business kind of PDFs you can get freely online. I downloaded them. They're a couple hundred pages long each. I ran WordHound on them, so it spat out dictionaries which it thought of words it thought were important, and then I correlated them. So I didn't want, every author is going to write in his own way, so some words are going to flag up more often than they should. But you run a correlation across them so that it takes sort of common threads that appear across all the PDFs you run. And yeah, so this is a really nice example again. So we've got, I don't know, things like Business Connect, Business Contact, Social Networking, Tech Mentor, Capital United, and so on and so forth. So even on a really primitive system, you're cracking some cool passwords. And then just a quick anecdote to finish off, and hopefully I'll have like a minute or two for questions. So obviously being the password guy, it's you get a lot of hashes to crack, and I randomly got one from a guy in the UK, and there was no subject, no hi, please crack this hash. I just got an Intel M hash, so I didn't really know what to do with it, but it turns out he wanted me to crack it, and so I asked for a bit of background for them. Obviously I've redacted this again, but it was a massive multinational in Europe. This was for a sysadmin, and the company worked in finance. And so I ran WordHound on this, and it turns out that was his password. And so again, it's just a really nice example of how, so that's Loan at Work for those guys at the back who can't really see, Elitified and stuff. But again, you can see that the industry he's working has directly influenced what he's chosen as his password. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Future editions of WordHound, I'd really like to support multiple languages. If you manage to stay away through the whole presentation, you'll know that it's corpus dependent. So I mean, it really comes down to acquiring the various other languages corpuses, which is the real challenge. I'd like to integrate more social media. Things like Wikipedia are also a great source of data. And then, of course, the whole open source thing. I'd love to get some more feedback from you guys, find out what's useful, what you need, what would be more useful if you implemented it. And yeah, if you want to get hold of me, you can get hold of me on any of those mediums. You can download the tool from Bitbucket. I'll put it up straight after this. And yeah, thanks, guys. Can I take any questions? Anything I was unclear about? Yep.
Why don't you start using the video? Why don't you start using video card CPU rather than traditional CPU, man? You'll save yourself a lot of time.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So I mean, the point of this wasn't really to say that so there are a number of ways you could use a dictionary generated by this. You could literally just put it through, if you're on a sort of fairly modest rig, you could put it through the traditional dictionary and rule-based attack, which is that's one use. But I mean, I think you were at Yanis's talk yesterday. But including words that are relevant, that are industry specific to things like T-mesis attacks and combinator attacks and the sort of the more complex attacks which require the more specific you can get and the more relevant you can get, the better. That's the way to go. I mean, I don't actually use CPU in my everyday life when I crack passwords. I don't run this on CPU normally. I was just doing that sort of to kind of make it a bit more of a challenge and more fun. But yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah.
Why weren't some of the passwords that you showed earlier on in your later screenshot caught earlier on if you'd been doing, for instance, combinator attacks or that kind of thing?
Oh, okay. So right. So those Battlefield examples, I hadn't run anything on them. I just downloaded them and ran a WordHound dictionary on them. And the point was not that this has got stuff it's impossible to crack otherwise. The point was just that even on a really low system, I can sort of show, just for demonstration purposes, that people are influenced by the industry they're in, and they choose passwords relate, Crisis, Battlefield, or this guy's obviously a gamer, and you can tell a lot by what he's choosing the password for, essentially, and cracking it. So yeah, that wasn't to say that those are impossible to crack otherwise. I mean, get a guy like Yanis and he'll crack all those. But what would be really interesting, get a guy like Yanis and give him some WordHound dictionaries to play around with, and I think you'll get some really, really interesting results. But yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Right. Anything else? Cool, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.